I disagreed with the level of options being authorized, which the Coca-Cola company stated in the proxy material would likely be issued within 4 years. I thought it was excessive. I abstained from voting. I announced my abstention after the vote. I did not want to be leading a proxy contest or anything of the sort. I think the management of Coca-Cola is first class. I think they got some difficult problems to take on, but I think they've got some tremendous assets working for them as well. And I thought that they're very decent people, and I thought if they were reasoned with and talked to, that they might well change things, and they have. I mean, they've dramatically changed that plan so that instead of over 4 years, it'll be over 12 years. Well, that's cutting it by 2/3. The chairman of the compensation committee is a very first-class person, very smart. She picked up on all the points on it, and they made the changes. So the abstention accomplished something very significant for Coca-Cola shareholders. The board of Berkshire wasn't involved with it. I mean, basically, we talked about it afterwards, and they approved of both the abstention and my suggestions to the Coca-Cola board.
There was criticism that you only abstained in the media.
Yeah.
Yours was what I would call the abstention heard round the world. That reflects a lack of understanding of the boardroom on the part of many journalists, does it not?
It really does. I mean, look at what we've accomplished by the abstention. You know, we're the largest shareholder of Coca-Cola. We want to be the largest shareholder of Coca-Cola. We want to be helpful to Coca-Cola. They want to do the right thing. There is no basic conflict at all between us and the Coca-Cola company. In fact, there's admiration on my part for the Coca-Cola management. I thought they made a mistake in doing what they were doing, and the abstention has worked out in terms of vastly changing the plan. And voting no and creating a ruckus would be been a very dumb thing. It would accomplish nothing. They would have dug in their heels. In all likelihood, that's human nature. It might have been more fun for the press, but it wouldn't have accomplished the goal. People they don't really I mean, you're dealing with a human institution. These are decent, high-grade human beings as directors, and I hadn't talked with them about the plan. I was not a director. My son was a director, but I wasn't a director. I did not know they were going to say that they were authorizing those shares to be issued over 4 years. When I read it, I thought it was a mistake. And what should I do? Should I start condemning all these people at Coca-Cola, telling the world they're terrible people? They're not terrible people. What I should do is convey my feelings to them. And I'm not going to vote for it and then talk to them afterwards. I mean, this was shortly before the annual meeting, but I did abstain. And then I talked to them, and now we've got a very sensible plan. And no personal relationships have been damaged. People do not feel they've got an enemy out there, which they don't have. It just makes sense in terms of human behavior. But it would have been a better story if I'd taken out ads or something and said this is the worst thing that's happened in history.
The journalist's pet peeve, of course, is the banks, as we've been discussing. They see headlines where Bank of America has to pay $18 billion in penalties, and the follow-up is, why isn't anyone going to jail? Why is it that journalists look at business results as a crime to be punished?
Well, I think that there have been individuals do things in business that they should go to jail for, and they have, and sometimes they should, and they haven't gone to jail. But there's two different. There are corporate sins. I mean, take the Solomon situation. The fellow that committed the original act, I think he went to jail for 4 months. I mean, he is the guy that caused our problems. But the second problem was not reporting it. Now, did you send somebody to jail for that or something? I don't think so. You penalize the company big time. I don't think you put them out of business or anything of the sort. And we paid a big price for the fact that Moser's actions were not reported to the Fed in a timely manner. It was important that the company pay that fine, and that we acknowledge the fact that that was a very wrong thing to do. You don't go around insulting the United States government on its regulations for selling U.S. bonds. But for an action, I think Moser probably should have gone away for a lot longer period, but I may be biased on that. But I don't think other people should have. And you just have to make a determination about when the activity of some individual is criminal. I think they should be prosecuted. But every time something goes wrong at the corporate level, we've had things go wrong at the corporate level. I will promise you that in the next 5 years, something will happen at Berkshire that is the wrong thing for somebody at the corporation to do. I mean, and we'll correct it, but it's going to happen from time to time. And I don't think I should go to jail if one of our 330,000 people does something they shouldn't do.
But in a sense, we're speaking of two sides of the same coin. The first one was the abstention, where journalists don't understand the boardroom, in a sense, and how it works. They don't participate in it. The second one is a misunderstanding of civil versus criminal law. It's not only a journalist issue, it's a country issue. Is there something we can do to better educate journalists? Should they be taking sabbaticals and working for Berkshire for 6 months or a year?
Wouldn't be a bad idea. It is very tough that I quoted Mickey Mantle as saying one time that it's amazing how easy this game is once you get up in the press box. I mean, and there is that problem. Of course, at the Washington Post, they used to say you don't have to be dead to write obituary. So it isn't necessary that you have experience in everything to write about it. But particularly if you're going to be a business journalist or a political journalist, you really should understand business. And going back to our boardroom example, boards are social organizations as well as having business responsibilities. But it's very important to understand how human beings act. And I've been on 19 boards. I mean, I can tell you that most journalists probably, and most Americans, and maybe many many people that write about business, they really don't understand the dynamics within a boardroom. And it's a little hard for journalists to be planted in boardrooms around the country, but I do think that business journalists, they have to understand accounting. You can't write about business without understanding accounting. And I run into a lot of journalists that really don't understand accounting, and that's too bad. That's the language of business, and that's important to understand. The best business journalist I've known has been Carol Loomis, and she didn't start out knowing anything about business, but she wanted to learn, and she is smarter at the end of every day than she is at the start of the day. Not very many people you can say that about, but she learned about accounting, she learned about all aspects of business, and as a result, she became the best business writer in the United States, or maybe the world.
You know that Jim Michaels, my former editor at Forbes, and I were talking one day about Carol Loomis.
I will say this for Carol, I've seen her start stories and find out that she was wrong in her working hypothesis, and she wrote according to the facts that she found out, and she was very good at finding out facts, very diligent, and that's why she wrote relatively few per year. But any story she wrote, you were going to learn something by reading, a lot by reading.
The world of journalism and media has changed, and it's reflective of the world that Carol represented, the detailed, long-form story. Content today is a commodity. And I'd first like to ask if the fact that it's a commodity had something to do with, I'll qualify it as your change of heart about the Washington Post and your interest in media general.
I wouldn't say it changed it too much. I mean, the Washington Post was selling the newspaper, basically, and that changed my forever commitment to it. And I also felt that I wouldn't be running Berkshire someday, and this would be a smaller commitment that we would usually make to marketable securities. And there was a very logical deal that could be worked out to redeem our shares that would be good for both the company and for Berkshire. So it was not really my feeling about newspaper journalism. Washington Post was getting out of the newspaper business. We were getting into it more at about the same time.
The newsstand is becoming social media in some respects. If you look at these numbers, they sound like a Berkshire deal. 1.1 billion, that's the number of visitors Facebook gets per month. 900 million is the number of visitors Google gets per month. So news is seen now through the filter of what our friends think is interesting.
Yeah. Everybody's a reporter.
How does that play out for us?
Well, it's really changed the world big time, and you can see it, in daily newspaper circulation in the United States. I guess there's maybe 1,400 or so daily papers left. There were 1,700 not so long ago, and their numbers are going to go down, and their circulation's going to go down, and their earnings are going to go down. So it is, the print daily newspaper is You know, it's been in decline for some period. It's going to continue in decline, and people with their computers, you know, with their mobile phones, whatever it is, they get things instantly. I mean, I used to have to wait till the next day to look at the box score of, you know, what the Cardinals did the night before, and you know, find out how musical it hit and everything. And now I can go to ESPN.com and, you know, get it play by play. So the world has really changed, and people are, you know, they have gotten used to and demand instant reporting, basically. And that means that they get a lot of stuff before the facts are out, but it means they get the facts very quickly too. They can get their financial news much faster now than when they waited to the next day to see where their stocks had closed.
There's a silver lining you may not be aware of. Social media, the big play right now is Twitter for news organization. Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway alone are 39 characters in a 140-character tweet. But your partner, Charlie Munger, is primarily grunting, and so he only takes up 2 or 3 characters. He's a valuable asset in the social media world.
He's essential. The key to our communication strategy. I still love long-form journalism. You can argue that a 10K is, you know, really long-form journalism, and that's how I get my information.
How does Berkshire deal with social media, or do you ignore it? We
pretty much ignore it. If you look at our webpage, for example, I mean, we came up with it 20 years ago. It's the same thing. It actually represents what we are. Now, we communicate with our shareholders more than any other company that I know of. I mean, I've just gotten through writing the 2014 annual report. 20,000 words, and those are my words. They're not some investor relations department or public relations department. They're not part of a sales document. We fell on our face in one respect last year, and I talk about it. I try to write that as exactly as I would write it to my sisters, assuming that they had virtually all of their net worth in Berkshire. They were interested in it, but they didn't follow it day by day, and they want to know what I think and what went wrong and what's going right and how I think the world will develop and a whole bunch of things. So we want to communicate directly with people, and I really feel that if you want to talk to people honestly about a subject in which they care about, certainly they care about their money, they'll listen. I mean, I do not worry about the number of words when I write that report. I worry about telling them the things I'd want to know if our positions were reversed and they were telling me about my investment.
In some respects, you anticipated the social media world. You mentioned earlier in our conversation the page-and-a-half memo that you send to your leadership every 2 years. The operative term today is TLDR, too long, didn't read. And you understood that if things were too long, people wouldn't read it a long time ago. So in some respects, you've seen where social media is going and you anticipated it.
Well, perhaps, but I also want to make it short because there's really only a few fundamental ideas I want to give those managers, and I want to make sure that they don't get lost on page 83 or something of the sort. People usually can't absorb 15 or 20 messages. But in terms of writing about Berkshire or talking about it, I feel we want to give people every bit of information that I would like to receive if I were on the other